part of this scientific endeavor. Minister Zweli Mkhize has been part, as you know, we're leading the African Union at the moment, has already entered into that dialogue on behalf of the African Union about access for the African region, and is totally supportive of South Africa's participation in trials. Thank you.
Thank you for Professor Rees, and also thank you for giving us the background into the story, and most importantly, for clarifying the issue that raised its ugly head a few months ago. Now, I'll hand over to Professor Gray, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the South African Medical Research Council, and a research professor in the School of Clinical Medicine at the University of the Witwatersrand. Over to you, Prof. Gray.
Thank you. DG Sandile Buthelezi, Zebulon Vilakazi, Johnny Mashlangu, other colleagues, all protocol observed. It's wonderful to be here today to witness the first, the announcement of the first coronavirus vaccine to be studied in Africa, and indeed in South Africa. So the South African Medical Research Council is a major funder of this program. And for those of you who don't know, our mission is to fund and conduct research that changes the lives of South Africans. So you can see why this is a very important study for us. Before the epidemic started in South Africa, a group of scientists, together with members of the Department of Health and the Department of Science and Innovation, got together and developed a research strategy for South Africa to try and see how we could make local innovation to combat the COVID epidemic in South Africa. And we were able to mobilize resources and get funding from the Department of Science and Innovation and release other funding from the MRC to conduct to start to fund a whole lot of research in South Africa. And this research started off with surveillance, trying to understand how the epidemic was unfolding in South Africa. It also entailed investment in finding local solutions towards testing. We also are collaborating with other funders to fund clinical interventions and therapeutic interventions for COVID infection, as well as understanding the immunology of the COVID epidemic in South Africa. What's very important as well is the issue around prevention, and we became very interested in funding work on vaccine design and development. And we looked at both local vaccine design and development as well as collaborating with international groups. And so this is the reason why we have collaborated with the Gates Foundation to fund this very important research that looks at both HIV infected and uninfected people and tries to understand the immunology and also answer the issues of preliminary efficacy. So this is very important. And this is one of 3 vaccine trials that will start this year. Very soon on that, we hope the AD26 J&J program will start, as well as an AD5 program that we're collaborating with people from Los Angeles. And so we are very proud and very excited to see this program work. And we look forward to seeing Shabir expand this to the rest of South Africa, and hopefully the results will be very encouraging. So it's very great to be here. And
so now with Professor Johnny Mashlangu having joined us, I'd like to hand over to him, who is the chair of the South African Medical Research Council and the head of the School of Pathology at Wits University.
Sorry, Professor Vilakazi, he's still not able to talk to us. He's in the meeting.
Recipients. We know that this might be difficult in other age groups, like you heard from Professor Shabir Mahdi in the old age group. But we are hopeful that the vaccine will confer long-lasting or even lifetime immunity or protection in the majority of recipients in all age groups. Because if that is the case, then we know this COVID-19 vaccine will form the backbone of national immunization programs in many parts of the world. And we need that kind of a vaccine so that we can accelerate the control of COVID-19. But not only the vaccine that will become the backbone of public health vaccination programs. But the vaccine that will offer an excellent example in terms of a life course immunization from childhood to elderly, because we know that this COVID-19 is affecting all age groups, and a vaccine that is under development now is an excellent candidate for a life course immunization. So with these few words, we like to really congratulate and support Wits University for this endeavor, and we hope that a vaccine will be found. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you. Professor Mphahlele, for those kind and encouraging words. And now we'll hand over to Professor Dr. Sandile Buthelezi, who will give us a final word, who is the Director General in the National Department of Health. This will be followed by the Q&A session. And I see a few questions have already been responded to by the panel, but we will now leave the platform open after Dr. Buthelezi has spoken. Over to you, Dr. Buthelezi. Dr. Buthelezi, can you unmute, please?
You're mute.
Hey, don't before technology. Thank you very much, Professor Vilakazi, and a good morning to the esteemed professors in the panel and members of the media. As a Department of Health, we are very happy, and we actually would like to congratulate Professor Madi for this groundbreaking launch of the vaccine here in South Africa. But secondly, we are proud that we are associated with Professor Madi as a member of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19, together with the other professors on the call here today. But thirdly, also, we are very proud that South Africa again has been placed in the center stage of leading in science. And as a department, we are always saying that South Africa must always lead from the front. There would have been no better time than today to actually launch this vaccine trial, as the country has reached a landmark, more than 100,000 infections, which we recorded last night. And we've also reached high levels of deaths in the country. And we really believe that it's a way to go. Of course, we currently now only depend mainly on non-pharmaceutical interventions. So if there is any way that we can fast track our road to getting the vaccine, that will be the long-lasting solution that we'll have as a country. I must say that as a country, we are actually... Yes. Yes, as a country, we are currently on stage 5 to 8 stages in terms of the management of the epidemic. And we're really focusing mainly now on hotspots. We've got about 29 in the country in the 4 high-burden provinces. And we are really having targeted interventions, health facility readiness, and ensuring that there is proper clinical management of patients that present to the facilities. So all this work, of course, we really hope that once we get towards prevention through the vaccine, and we pray that this vaccine development will actually yield positive results in terms of immunogenicity. And we thank the team, especially Professor Madi, MRC, Wits University, and all other collaborating institutions, and we pledge our support as a Department of Health. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Buthelezi. And we are delighted to note that the university and other universities and research entities in the country will have the support at the national policy level through the department and obviously the ministry and the government at large. And your words are very encouraging indeed. So, colleagues, this brings us to the final session of the Q&A. So what will happen is that some questions I'm aware have been already fielded and responded to by some of the panelists. So they will come to the Q&A channel, and please again state your name and organization. Who would you like to respond to your questions? And of course, please unmute yourself when asked to do so. So most of the panelists will be available for interviews after the session. Should you wish to set up follow-up interview, please you can email them to vets.news@vets.ac.za. And so this starts our 30-minute Q&A session. And I see, if you help me here, bear with me for a second, that there are questions that have come through. The first one comes from Graham Hoskin from Sunday Times, who asks, please panelists note this, how were the people taking part in the trial selected? First about the selection of the individuals taking part in the trial. The second part of the question is, what kind of questions were they asked? And the last one is on the gender split between men and women of the initial cohort. So I suppose you'll go through question by question. So who is the respondent? Will it be Professor Mahdi?
So thanks, Ebra.
Shabe?
What we've done is that we've basically just sort of sent out messages in Soweto in terms of, at least that's for at my site. Like I said, currently in Gauteng, there are 3 sites that will be involved. And we've been sending out messages to the community in terms of people that might be interested in participating. And to give you as an example, last week, when we sent out our initial message, we had close on to 1,000 people that arrived at our clinic in a space of 3 days, wanting to know more about the study as well as wanting to participate. So once an individual comes to the site and indicates an interest to participate, what happens is that they go through a process known as informed consenting, where the staff that are involved in the study will basically engage with the individual in terms of understanding what is their interest in terms of wanting to participate, as well as explaining to them what participation in the study would actually entail. After that process, what next happens is that the participants are actually provided what we call an informed consent form, and they actually go back home and they've got the luxury of being able to read it at their own convenience. They are then brought back, and that is started as from Monday. They are then brought back to basically, if they are interested, they would come back, and then they would engage with the investigators again in terms of whether they're still interested or not. And if they are interested, the investigators would then ask them to complete the questionnaire, which basically involves trying to get an understanding as to how well they actually comprehend what it means to participate in a study, including issues around risk and in terms of what is expected of them. So it's sort of a 10-page, 10 questions that are asked, which does a sort of a macro assessment in terms of their knowledge. And it is only if they score 8 out of the 10 that they are actually allowed to participate in the study. If they do not score 8 out of 10, we try to go through the process again to heighten the level of understanding of the study. In terms of males and females, there isn't any sort of predilection for wanting to enroll one or the other group. We're wanting there to be some sort of a balance between men and women that are eventually participating in the study so that the results can be more generalizable.
Thank you, Prof. Mahdi. The second one is just a comment from the colleague at VETS, which is supportive. Thank you, Robin. There's a question from Robinson Ngola from Power FM, who asked about the cost of the study. And again, the second part is, when do we expect it to have it rolled out if it's approved? So the costs and the timelines of the rollout process.
Yeah, so in terms of the costs of the South African study, I mean, usually it costs a few $1 million to be able to do this sort of studies. The total cost of the South African study is roughly about 150 million rand. That would be the cost of the South African study. And that is really a study which is done at a relatively low cost compared to what it usually entails to these sort of intensive studies. In terms of when the vaccine will be rolled out, I think the reality is that our best case scenario is that we would be able to have an answer for this particular vaccine by the end of this year. That is our best case scenario. It might take longer depending on how quickly we are through outcome cases. But even after that has been completed, it doesn't mean that the vaccine becomes available immediately. Because what needs to then happen is that there needs to be manufacturing plants that are set up, which is currently being done for this vaccine, both in Europe, in the United States, as well as in India. And then the product that comes out from those manufacturing facilities needs to be evaluated in terms of ensuring that they're sort of similar to the product that was evaluated. So the best case scenario in terms of when this vaccine might become available will probably be in the third quarter of 2021.
Okay.
Can I just add something to that? In terms of vaccine availability, I think that this is a really critical thing to understand, because even if we have successful vaccines through clinical trials, we will not have enough vaccine by the end of 2021 for the whole world. We're talking billions and billions of doses. So we are going to have to look, as I say, at prioritization. So there is an entire global effort at the moment, which is looking at how do we prioritize, who do we prioritize, how do we prioritize? And that will depend on the kind of vaccine that is successful, because different vaccines have different characteristics. But that is where this global debate about access to vaccines becomes very important. And because it's the media, I would really, really love it if the media takes up this call. We had the same issue with access to antiretrovirals, and now we're seeing a replay potentially with access to a successful vaccine. So I think that this is a drum we must really hit very hard in our region, because we will be the region that will be left behind otherwise. This is what happened with the pandemic flu vaccine. Africa got very little vaccine and we got it months too late. And we cannot allow that to happen again. So I would really encourage media to take an active interest in this in terms of this global debate.
Can I add, Zeblon? Yes. Can I add? I just want to say that that's also why it's important for us we hope that not only one vaccine will be successful. We need 5 or 6 vaccines to be successful, and so to make sure that we can scale up to the billions of doses we need at a global level, and also why it's important for South Africa to be involved in not only one but many efficacy studies, because if we are involved in the efficacy studies, we know exactly how we managed it in South Africa, and the regulatory authorities will have experience with the vaccine and will make it easier for it to license. And so having local experience with an experimental vaccine is critical to the endeavor for licensure. And also it's also critical because if we are involved in efficacy studies, it gives us first in the queue for access afterwards as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenda and Helen, for the follow-up question, for the follow-up responses. Now, on funding again, I think one came out from Liz Cummins.